Ready to go? And I'm calling to order the Pickens County Council work session of Monday, March 16, 2026. First item up is the invocation and the pledge, which Heavenly Father, we know the greatest wisdom always comes to those who choose to follow, serve, and honor you. Be with each counselor tonight. May we honor you through our discussion, debate, and votes, and may the results of our decisions truly benefit the citizens of Pickens County. In your loving name, Jesus, dear Lord, we pray. Amen. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, first item up is going to be 2A. This is going to be a second reading, hopefully, section 302, the RV parks and campgrounds. This was a goal of myself and Dale, I believe. We both worked on this, as well as it went to the Planning Commission. Now, what you have in your packet, this right here, first, I think it's the first one, is what came from the Planning Commission. So it was 302, which is in the ordinance now, and then their changes. Now, what you see second there in the red is what Dale and I did. We worked a little bit with Allison. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go paragraph by paragraph like we did with the organizational rules. Me, Dale, and myself, Allison, Destiny will kind of introduce each paragraph as we see fit. And then council just weigh in if it's something you want to change, something you agree with. We'll try to get through it. So, okay, so if you look at the Planning Commission's title, they changed it. They took out recreational vehicles, RV parks, and they just call it campgrounds. Now, if you look at mine, what we came up with, campground, we didn't make any changes. Campgrounds is fine. Does anybody have any objections to that? Destiny, I know you were talking about changing that wording.
Right, specifically because I know the moratorium addressed RVs, and so we would just need to be sure that RVs are not addressed elsewhere in the ordinance and the UDSO in totality, just to be sure there's no inconsistency.
Planning will take care of that?
I think we can write it into the whereas section.
Okay.
To change anywhere else.
Is everybody okay with the new title of campground? Okay. So now we're going to go to 302A. So we're going to start with the changes that were made in the Planning Commission. You can see it was mostly wording. They're going to take out recreational parks and recreational vehicles everywhere. They took out that last sentence. Now, Dale and I looked at that. We thought everything was fine except the wording. It should be needed by such an endeavor. Any thoughts on that? Okay, it's okay. We're okay with that. I'm going to go to 302B and we'll go 1. Now, you can look at what the Planning Commission did. They just took out park or they capitalized campground. There's a definition, campground and campsites. Campground is the overall thing. Campsite is each little site, capitalizing those C's for the definition. Now, when you look at mine and Dale's, you'll see sites I just call campsites. That should be done in 2 places. One, in that second sentence, it says access to individual sites. It should be campsites. Then that third sentence, campsites again. Other than that, we agreed with the Planning Commission. Any problems with that? Good on the first 3. Okay, 1A is roadways. You can see the changes that they made. Roadways and any area used for vehicle movement, just more detail. Campgrounds shall be constructed and maintained to all weather standards, meaning that somebody could go in there 5 years, a code officer, and say that's not being maintained. Continue. Now, if you look at ours, we accepted that it should be within a campground, right? Not an campground. It just be A. Yeah. Should just be A. So I made that change. Any concerns with one? Okay, the first few are pretty easy. Okay, then we get to 1B. They don't make any changes to what's in the DSO. Planning Commission, no changes. The only thing I have is a question for Allison, because it says 35-foot turning radius required on all curves. That's how it's written now, and that's the Planning Commission has. Is it all curves or just the turnaround?
I believe it's just the turnaround.
Is that what it should be? Okay, so you want to change turning radius required to all turnarounds and strike out curves? Anybody have any thoughts on that?
Turnaround would be like a cul-de-sac.
You want to put cul-de-sac in? I just picked turn.
What my thinking is, if you're pulling a camper, you'll need to be further wide enough to navigate. Make sense?
I think it's fine to leave it as a curve because that also covers the turn.
Okay. So
Does it?
Oh.
I just would want us to all be very, very clear because it comes up 5 years from now, we need to be sure that it is a curve or it is a turnaround.
Well, what I'm going to do is if they think it's curves, I'll just leave it originally. I'll scratch out the turnarounds. We'll just go with the planning commission version, which is just curves.
If it's, that means anywhere the road curves has to have a 35-foot turning radius. That feels,
We could keep both, turnaround and curves.
I probably would do that. Probably wouldn't hurt to specify it.
I don't know. I don't know.
Well,
That's your
it's
time.
twofold.
Engineering's still gonna hold them to whatever standards they have in this process as well. So it may be above and beyond.
That's a
what is in
twofold
here.
thing. It's number one, fire truck,
Yes,
and then
emergency.
number two, it's long, 38-foot gooseneck crew cab truck. Driveway, man.
Here we go again. Yeah.
So what does the administration want to do?
I think if they're distinct, we want to put both.
Okay, so it's going to be turnarounds and curves.
Yes.
All right, that's the detail you want. Okay, check. Okay, this is going to be a Destiny one. Item number 2, 302B2. You can see the changes Planning Commission took out. Remember, we used to just have 5 to 10 acres in different areas like Appalachian agricultural. It had different ones. Planning Commission just made it 5 to 10 acres countywide. Now, I looked at that, me and Dale looked at that, we were fine with that, but Destiny had a concern about that.
I'm actually fine with the 5 to 10. I think my concerns stem from just clarifying the rationale behind it, because if we do go into any sort of litigation about it, we want to be able to explain why, and we don't want it to be arbitrary. And so I think we should just add some sort of language to just strengthen our rationale. I have 2 options. One, it retains it, but it strengthens it, and the other provides flexibility. So it would just be a sentence: campground shall be a minimum of 5 acres and shall not exceed 10 acres in size. The acreage limitation is intended to ensure compatibility with surrounding rural land uses, manage traffic and infrastructure impacts, and maintain the recreational character of campground developments. And that's really just to provide the court or anyone with just rationale as to why we put a limit on it.
And you're a lawyer. What do you think?
No, I think the why is a good reason to tell him right up front what the intent of this council is. I think that would be helpful down the road. So it's to keep it harmonious with surrounding uses, and you state that.
Okay, everybody okay with that?
Yes.
I have a question. Do we know where the 5 and 10 is that? I wasn't in the planning commission meeting, so they cannot, based on what nearby counties do, or is based on what they
No,
already have in the county?
5 and 10 came from council when we reviewed this and that was not a staff or planning commission recommendation. So it's been in there.
Yeah, like if you look at the sheet, you'll see what's in there now. We had it kind of differentiated that it was RV parks, minimum of 5 acres and shall not exceed 10 acres. And Appalachian must be a minimum of 5 acres. They had all that wording there. They made it real simple.
I've been to, so I go camping like tent camping, and I've been to parks all around the upstate that are much larger than lovely. Camping sites and other camping sites to go around. I'm just wondering.
How many acres is Mount Breed?
I knew you were gonna ask that question.
Almost,
How many?
almost 200.
Oh,
I
so
think. Or is
we're
it 100?
trying to pass an ordinance that we can't comply with.
I would make a distinction.
Okay.
The distinction would be that purpose of that amenity out there is completely surrounded by water, is to provide that type of waterfront recreation.
So if I were to have 200 acres that I want to provide waterfront recreation, that type, are you saying I can't compete with the county?
Well, if it's owned by Duke and required by FERC to be provided to the public, that would be different.
I don't see how, you're creating a monopoly.
I don't know about that.
You very much are, you're saying, do as we say, not as we do.
Do as we're mandated by the feds to do.
What is your
Well, we're-
recommendation? Would you recommend it to be bigger and how much bigger?
He's just messing with me.
I'm not just messing with him as much as I am. I think you have a very valid point. If I went and bought 20 acres off Highway 11, I wanted to have a campground on Highway 11 and do nothing but tents. No campers, tents and nature trails and all the wonderful things. Couldn't do that. And it would do nothing to hurt what's in that area already. There's so much nature and beauty here. It's not unrealistic to think somebody might want to do something on more than 10 acres, which then brings my question of, could you divide the parcels and have recreation on 10 acres and the campground only be on 10 acres? And then if I can do that, can I divide it even further down, about 30 acres, do 10 acres on this side, 10 acres in the middle of recreation, and 10 acres on this side? Would that be allowed with this ordinance?
And in fact, if we're talking about a mixed-use campground, which is a mix of tent and RV, it would actually be really not a fun, no one would want to go tent camp. 8 acres, for example, that was full of RVs. They're normally separate. So, like I'm looking on the KOA website, so in mixed-use campgrounds, if you've got tents, cabins, and RVs, you're expected to be at least 20 acres, because those places all want different kinds of accommodations, and they want space from each other. So I understand that on the one hand, we have people saying they don't want a sea of RVs. I think that's what people were trying to prevent, is to make sure we didn't have a filling zone. But if we are now making the ordinance be the exact same thing for RVs as tent camping, then we've really shut down the option for anyone in Pickens County to build a tent if you maximum at 10 acres.
That way. 2 years, when was this?
November of 2020.
Someone got it right the first time.
Well, and Wild Tree Park was built before that.
I mean, I'm okay with 5 to 10. I mean, I don't feel strong with that. I'm okay. How does everybody else feel?
It just feels like arbitrary numbers.
Yeah. And if you're, I mean, that's what,
We had a lot of discussion about that.
that's
Seemed
your-
a lot.
Henry was here.
Yeah,
well, part of it was we were also discussing how many acres they all needed, or how much many you could put per acre, and then we were doing it with the zones, and that to me got caught up in that bigger
You want to just put that one on hold for a while? We'll get back to it. All right, let's get back. Okay, third is going to be, you can see the changes they made in item number 3. Not really a lot. They just, within any consecutive 365-day period. Now, Dale was of the idea, he liked this the way it was. I had issues with park model units, which is tiny homes and on-site rental. I was not a fan of those. I was thinking more RVs, anything you can kind of pull in there, tents you can set up and be gone, rather than the permanent structure.
Isn't that covered by the fact that we're limiting how long they can stay?
Well, no, my thing was a permanent structure being, something that's bolted into the ground. I didn't support that.
So you got rid of rental cap. You don't want anyone to be able to build rental cabins.
Because a lot of times they end up near neighborhoods and things, and I just gotten a lot of complaints. There's one on Haywood Road they were going to build, and we just got loads of complaints. One on Country Club Road, complaints about that. When that thing was first built, there was 120 people at that meeting. So I'm okay with the RV park. Somebody who comes in with an RV, they come in with a villa, they come in with a tent. That's how I feel. I mean, Dale, you felt differently?
Well, when I sort of did a poll, these are some of the issues that were brought up. First of all, to forbid cabins for rent in future campgrounds, it would potentially negatively impact the tourist industry in Pickens County. Also, it would affect or discriminate against individuals who do not prefer using a camper or a tent, but prefer a cabin. And let's see, what was the other one? Well, let's see. Oh, yeah, and they said, you know, if we're worried about the stay, we probably should address that in the language of the ordinance instead of the nullifying of the cabin situation. And then the fourth thing that was brought up is just had to do with the pure nostalgia of the whole camping experience. And if we build it just according to county codes, does that mean we could not use sawmill lumber, rough beams, or something like that to make it the camping experience? So that was a question that was brought up in it.
What are concrete? What are
They're
I haven't been out there in so long, I can't.
Those
They're
at
part
Mile
one.
Creek are actually, that came in as a unit.
Is it like a prefab?
they're part models,
It's a fully functional.
but then they have a full foundation.
Here's my concern. I'll go out.
Not by the new standard.
So much have a problem with it. But I'm concerned that the situation could come that somebody does campground, goes belly up. All this money building all these little houses. I'm gonna start renting them. They're not gonna come up here and tell us. We've already been told we don't have enough staff to force a lot of things. Then you end up with a cabin subdivision.
My whole concern is that I don't like us when we overreach on people who are trying to start businesses. Or, and to me, if somewhere in Pickens County, someone wants to buy 20 acres and put a few rental cabins on it and create an experience for people to be in the nature of Pickens County, sounds lovely. So that's on one, but I understand the other side is you want to make sure it's not 20 acres of wall-to-wall RVs. So I would like us to make sure that we're writing this in such a way. I know we're trying to prevent problems, but we also might be shutting down some businesses, ways of enjoying, to your point, tourism industry. People are coming here because it's beautiful. I don't want to,
Shut anybody down, just anything new.
anybody new wouldn't be able to. So
Shutting down.
Scott, have you thoughts on it?
I don't particularly have an issue with the, permanent structure. I mean, we already have them out. Table Rock, they've got cabins out there, and they do very well. I don't particularly have a problem with cabins. I think if we could write something that says that, that you can't have them as a permanent home,
yeah,
I think that would suffice. So, because you can do, it's not just a cabin we got to worry about. Some of these fifth wheel trailers, they're all over the county. People are living in them. It's unsightly. We're dealing with one right now. Not a good deal. So, I think we have language in there that says that they cannot be a permanent residence.
There is the next
I
paragraph.
wouldn't rule out having a cabin, but it's going to depend on. I mean, when they build this, it has to come before the planning commission anyway, right? Do we already have different rules for cabins versus RVs versus tents? I mean, as far as room allotted for cabin, we already have that specifically.
that's later in this.
Yeah,
so
but
I
it's
think
not in the ordinance now. If they were to do cabins, we would require, at this point, we would require park model or build on. That's what building codes would require.
But we don't have a particular thing that says they have to be 100 feet apart, 500 feet.
thought that was later in this. It says like maximum square feet of 700 square feet. They can't be more than 10 feet extra.
Yeah, it's just not in the current.
Yes,
Not the
it's that, yeah. In the planning commission proposal, I think it's not full detail. Okay, so you think we're leaning towards having cabins in there? Council Bowers, that
Very much,
okay, so cabins would probably be a 5-1 rule. Okay, so cabins it is. So that's gonna be the language of the planning commission, which is that first number, 3, right? We're gonna go with that language. Now, they lowered it from being in there as many as, so we're gonna put check next to that. The planning commission lowered the maximum stay from 180 to 90 days within any consecutive 365 day period. Now, Alice, could you tell us about it?
Yeah, I think their concern is just that they become permanent or semi-permanent. They don't want people staying here long term. From a staff perspective, I would say that's difficult for us to proactively enforce because we don't have the manpower to check every campsite 45 to 90 days to see how long people are there. But we don't have an issue with the rule. It's the same way we've handled the 180. We don't have an issue with 180 days either. We did check with Duke, who is the one that usually has the longer stays, and they did not have an issue with that.
Okay, Destiny, when you look at the wording there, it says no campsite may be used for more than 90 days within a consecutive 365 day period by the same occupant. Is you okay with that?
No, I have the same concerns Allison does, where I think the enforcement mechanism isn't clear. And I think if we don't have a mechanism for it, I think that's problematic for the future. I understand things haven't come up yet, but we need to be able to articulate in the ordinance how we're going to. If we don't have the staff to enforce it, I think that's something to consider.
Could that be something that we should see then later in this reading where it talks about, look at the planning commission model, 11, so that would be,
Management plan?
yep, the management plan.
Yep.
Did you not have to address that, the management plan, on how you enforce that yourself and then be subject to check by the county?
I mean, that's a solution. I mean, I don't have a lot of faith in it. That's one of the reasons I don't want permanent cabins, because I think in the long run, there'll be people be living.
All it takes is one spot check. You have to put an enforcement penalty to it, but all it takes is one spot check, somebody getting busted for letting somebody in, boom.
Okay.
Yeah, because the management would have to show the day they checked in. And if they're still there.
Do we have a penalty
Fine.
built in?
There's a general penalty in our ordinance. If you don't, if there's something that says it's illegal to spit gum on the sidewalk, that doesn't give a penalty. In front of our code of ordinances, there's a 30-day fine general penalty. So that's out there. What's that?
Per occurrence.
Per occurrence.
So on this one, it looks like the planning commission 3 is what we're going.
I just want to know where 90 days came from. Just Destiny's previous thing, we need to justify where we got numbers.
Now it's
90 days seems, especially if it's ever an entire year. So that means someone can come, here for football, for Clinton football season, go home for Christmas, come back and camp out for baseball season. They'd be here too long. So 90 days is in a consecutive year, 365-day time period. It seems kind of short to me. I know retired couples who move every 3 to 6 months, they move around. So I'm just wondering where the logic was, take it from 180 to 90.
Allison, you were there.
I came from planning commission. I just wanted
Lower number.
lower number.
Yeah, I was at that meeting. I think, and they talked about Duke Energy had an issue with it and found out. That was it. We advanced that.
I can understand 90 if it was no, you can't be there for more than 90 consecutive days. I can start to get that. When you're saying 90 days in an entire year, that starts to feel short. So to me, I'd kind of like to go with either of them. Either you can't be there more than 90 consecutive days, or you can't be there 180 days in an
The guy just moves out for 1 day. In fact.
Like we go 30 days.
What's that?
Make them be gone for 30 days.
Or if somebody's just gonna go to another park. They use their 90 days.
That's their, they're literally travel the country doing just that,
Or another catch.
not within the same park.
It says you can't leave.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. You have to leave that park for 30 days.
It says 3B, moving one campsite to another.
So you would like to do what? Have it 90 days and then?
No more than 90 consecutive days or 180 days within a period of 60. I mean, I don't mean to overcomplicate it. I'm just saying, to me, it seems like overkill to make it 90 and not. You want it together.
It really feels like this is to kill the camping industry.
Yeah. Full time repeaters.
That's what made it full-time
Yeah.
careers.
So my proposal would be one of those, whichever y'all prefer. You can't be more than 90 consecutive days, or you can't be more. Choose one. Do my recommendation.
Just for knowledge purposes, Mill Creek requires someone to move every 2 weeks. We do not limit beyond 180 days.
What about your, how does this affect your park code?
That agreement.
Pre-existing non-conforming.
What, can you say your question again?
Not, sorry.
How does this affect the park codes?
This specific, like, this number 3, or
90 days.
I'd have to look at it and see again.
They're there from theoretically March to December.
Yeah.
That's well beyond even the 180. No.
Yeah, I guess so, yeah.
I would argue that's it's not a job in terms of employee position, but that's something where they're providing a benefit.
Are they living in a camper for that period of time?
Like a
That's what we need them
volunteer.
to.
Any other comments on that one?
Also, when you said that health requires them to move every 2 weeks, they just require them to move to a different campsite within the campground?
Can't stay on one campsite for just to ensure that the best ones are served all
I
year.
mean, I tend to agree. I don't want to tell people that, okay, you can spend 90 days here and then you can't come back for another year. That seems a little non-constructive to me. I think it's.
How about we just meet in middle and do 135?
And tell them they can't come back for another year.
It's very
I mean, it's all arbitrary. I mean,
Well, if the problem is you don't want them to feel like they're living there, then to me the consecutive. How many consecutive days can? That's what Mile Creek is. After 2 consecutive weeks, you have. Yeah, but we don't care about the total time. I mean, if you're concerned, for whatever reason, the people are staying too long, then your concern is that they're parking for too long. So that's consecutive days.
yeah, but the thing is, their rule is simple. Just to be blunt. I mean, you can just move a lot over, and it doesn't really, and you restart the clock. I mean, that's what they're trying to avoid.
Don't restart the clock.
You don't
180
restart
days.
the 180 days, you just restart your
That's what I mean. He's moving one lot over every 2 weeks.
No, he is. And he gets a total of 180 days a year.
I know, but why not just give him 180 days? As long as they were
To
that.
keep him from taking the point.
It's the best spot. The one
We want all the campsites to be available to everyone throughout the year.
Oh, I got you. I don't know. I'm okay with the way they wrote. What would you like to do? All right, we'll get back to it. I got a sense of where we're at. I mean, obviously we're gonna keep. You said you wanted to do what? You wanted to do 90 days consecutive?
Either a consecutive limit or a year limit. Like just choose one.
Like I said, I did halfway at 135 days. What's that? Under 2. That's your limit. Change that 90 to 135. And then, if it's a stay for like a Duke Energy or something like that, then they, most of that's gonna cover most people. Come back and go to another.
How many facilities do we have?
Yep.
Do we know how many facilities we have?
I
Is there a
do.
record of that?
They probably have a
I'm
rough
sure-
idea downstairs.
Duke has it, yeah.
They said they were okay with the 90-day limit.
Yeah, and I think Sydney also mentioned they've been shifting more towards hotels than campgrounds in general.
So what we were discussing offline, and we haven't completed this thought, but it might be a way forward, just for y'all all to think about, is there's a certain number of days you can do your primary residence as an Airbnb and it still get primary residence taxation. I don't remember what that number is, but we'll
Depends
want
on
to
where you
verify
live.
that.
Clemson is a massive.
12 days.
After that, you register as a business. So it depends on where you live.
Well, and we don't have business license per se in the county, so it'd be broader, but I want to check that number because it may be, what if it's 135 days? What if it's something like that would help us resolve this dispute? I think it's less than that,
Yeah.
frankly, but
Oh, yeah, I mean, it's a tax IRS. My solution would be, with your idea of consecutive, 135 days. That would be my solution. What does anybody else?
We'd like to give a legal justification for 135.
No.
Any of these day amounts?
No, I just want us to be clear on how we're going to enforce it.
No.
Well, yeah. Mr. Bauer's idea of, you tell it has to be in the handbook or the management book,
if they're not
and that the
enforcing.
county has the right to spot check.
Okay.
Whose jurisdiction would that fall under enforcement?
It would be environmental enforcement. I would think building codes are environmental. The remedy would be you
would be
lose your,
code
you lose your permit to operate. Why would you mean?
So building codes?
No.
I would say code.
Environmental.
Code enforcement.
You give them a $500 fine first, or, and then a repeated offense would take your license.
Well,
or-
that's normal, you're exactly right, Mr. Lang. That's the way we would normally do enforcement. The warnings, it would be, then we would go to take you in front of the magistrate and until you get all the way to the end of the process where we are now on the property you're talking about. Actually saying, no, we're yanking your permit. So that, you have to graduate it exactly. Just to be practically fair.
Trying to hold things up. All right, your management plan, who would that go to?
With the first, when you got, land use approval,
Mm-hmm.
under this ordinance, you'd have to provide it, or would that need to go on for this stage?
So the way planning commission wrote it, it's at land use stage, but we see that as not part of the land use discussion and actually at the development stage is what
And that's on down the list. We'll get to that.
But where I'm headed with that is, once it's established, it's built, then who gets the management plan? Who's responsible
So they
for
have
the
to-
upkeep of that?
Right, they have to present it to get the land use approval or the development permit to be on file. And then if there were a complaint or something, we would investigate our environmental enforcement or code enforcement. Investigate. And after they've determined whether or not there is a violation, then we move through a kind of escalating steps of enforcement, like we do already with other things.
So there's already a procedure.
We'd follow what we do.
So this is the second reading. We could just always come back to this. I would say, line with Council Linville, consecutive period, I would say 135 is a compromise. Unless there's another method you want to use. I say we put that in as a placeholder right now.
You put consecutive in place of.
No. No, it's, if you look at the planning commission one, it just says, no campsite may be used for more than 135 days within any consecutive period by the same applicant. That's along the lines of what she talked about, consecutive days. And now the problem you have with that is you just move one site over and you're starting the clock again or not?
That's 3A, so 3A would have to be changed as well. You're saying 135 days, and that's not gonna apply.
No, it says no campsite may be used for more than 90. Campsite is one little lot. So you could just move to the next lot.
3B.
Oh, 3B, you're right.
Says you can.
Okay, you're right. Gotcha. Okay, I didn't read that. Okay. So is that a placeholder for now? 135? Going once?
Yeah.
Okay, that's a placeholder. Okay, so we're gonna say that's 3, all those 90s become 135. And now we go to 4.
You really wanna get picky,
So,
3B, you need to take RV park out. Of the-
oh yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
Yeah, take that out for sure. That has to come out. Hopefully they'll catch that when they read it again. Okay, so item number 4, this is interesting. Overall density of the park shall be limited to no more than 6 campsites. It used to be 4, and they raised it to 6. Al, you want to comment on that?
I really cannot
Okay.
speak to their thought process. I'm sorry.
So,
We should just clarify calculation, whether it's 4 or 6. We just gotta clarify.
how would you interpret that? Allison?
6 per each acre. So if it's a 10-acre park,
We have 60.
yeah, it's not.
So what they were getting at was the problem that I talked about initially. They were getting at the idea that if you had, let's say, 6 per acre and it's 10 acres, that's 60. Now, if you have, let's say, 1,000 square feet per site, you could put 43 in 1 acre. Now, I used to make that order, so I went out and looked at a lot of campsites. Most of them are built like this. They're not gonna build a road like this and squish them all in 1 acre, because the road's just too expensive. So you just naturally see this. So the worry that I had initially, just in life, just didn't pan out, because they're not gonna build squiggly roads in just 1 acre, because it'd be too expensive. So I like the original reading of the ordinance, which we have in 302 now. I would change this overall density, which is overall 10 acres times 4 per acre, it's 40. And you know, depending on the size of each lot, that's how far you put them. And I don't think you're gonna stick them all in 1 acre. So this actually looks like it raises the density, which I'm opposed to. That's why I'm saying we should go back to the 4. What do you think?
I'm good with 4, because you got to allow for.
Okay, so that's 2 for 4. How do you feel? Any other comments? 4 or 6?
Done the math, they're actually laid it out, but when you look at each site has to be so big with so much space on either side and all the things. A campsite for a pop-up camper is gonna be different than a campsite for a 38-foot fifth wheel. It's gonna be different than a 40-foot motorhome, so it may be that you can only get 4, but if you're doing pop-ups and insights, then 6 actually makes sense. And the only reason I say that is if you go to my free, look at the different size sites. You have denser areas of our own park, depending on where you are within the park, but it also determines what kind of camper you can put or RV you can put on that site. So that's the only reason why I don't have a problem with 6, as long as you have all of the other buffer, 20-foot, max of, so that when you're laying out your sites, you gotta determine, do you want it big enough for a 40-foot? Or do you only want it big enough for a 20-foot? And I think that, you know, that's the only reason why I don't want a hard and fast forward.
But the thing that's interesting, if you look at their rule, they talk about each acre. So you would take one snapshot of each acre, and how you define that is gonna be difficult. So they're saying 6 each acre. What I'm saying is 4 overall. So you'd have 10 times 4, 40. Some acres you could put 6, some acres you could put 2. You know what I mean? They're gonna have flexibility under my plan. Under their plan, each acre, they're limiting each acre, and he's not gonna have as much flexibility.
I prefer the flexibility option, but this is where I think we're struggling by calling these all campsites as if they're all the same thing. Because when you look at a map of a campsite, my family camps several times a year, we're the people in the tent. When you look at a map of a campsite, there's usually, you know, the RVs are over in one section, and then the tent sites are in a whole other section. And they're often a road that goes off of your little circle. They're all clumped together because tent sites are tiny. And you can, you know, like in this room, there would probably be 2, maybe 3. I mean, like tent sites are usually pretty close to each other. And they have a bathroom, they have a bathroom that you have to hike over to. So it starts to be really silly if you're giving the exact same rules for tent sites as you are for where an RV goes. So this is just, I think the struggle that I keep bringing up is because we're calling something a campsite that has different functions. So maybe just a letter D here that says, what's the term when it's rough tent?
Primitive.
Primitive, thank you. Primitive tents can be, at the density option of the owner or whatever. Like, you're not going to put them too close together because people won't want to stay there. But just recognizing that primitive tent sites do not apply to this bridge limit, I feel would give somebody more flexibility. And I want to encourage people to be building. And this will be great. So then we make a letter D that separates primitive sites from.
What's interesting, if you look at Table Rock's 2 parks, and I looked at another one in Anderson, is that when you look at the total versus the number of campsites, its average is about 4. Because like I said, they don't build, there's a large section that is 0. Because they're just not gonna run a road to this corner of it. But here, on this road, it's like 10. If the acre is rectangular, there's like 10. So my plan gives it, rather than 6 per each acre, my plan gives it much more flexibility. Because there's gonna be a lot. I think it's 100, you have to have 100 feet off of each line and do nothing. So that's gonna raise the average everywhere else.
Yeah.
This is gonna raise the average everywhere else. That's why I like that overall 4. But you wanna make it 6? I mean, you could, but I mean, it's more flexible with the way the rule is now. That's the only thing I mean. Does anybody else wanna weigh in on that?
What if we consider something like 5 per acre, and make it to where it's a 10-acre park, you can get up to 50, up to, if you can meet every other requirement. If it's a 1-acre park, you can get 5, as long as you can meet every other requirement. What's the difference?
Yeah, but I think you can accomplish that with the language that we have here. Overall density shall be limited to no more than 5 campsites per acre or 4, whatever it is. That gives you that overall 50.
Yeah.
That's why I like that language. And whoever wrote this years ago, I thought, it took me a while to get there, but I thought it was actually cool. All right, so I think 4. Councilor Bowers thinks 5. Anybody else have any thoughts? Chris, what do you think? 4. Councilor Linville?
I prefer 5.
Okay, you guys are gonna make the choice over here.
I'm gonna go with 5. I'll split the difference.
I'm good with
All right, the details on that below, I mean, I don't support the cabins in those parks, so you guys can speak. Look at, 4, A, B, and C.
C helps address somebody else's concerns that you didn't want it just to be an entirely bunch of housing.
Yeah, it does.
So I like these 3. I mean, I don't know where the 700 square foot comes from, but I'll trust that they did some research on what people want out of the cabin.
We do have a concern about storage buildings being used as cabins with the limit. It's an issue for building code.
So is that problem allowed here?
It could be a concern.
So
They
we
could-
just need to put a D in there that they need to be park models or site built.
Well, doesn't it say that no campsite should be used as a permanent residence? Only shall be used for travel trailers, pickup campers, coaches. And then it talks about tents, park model use. It doesn't say sheds
Storage.
or storage facilities. So doesn't that
If
knock
their
it out?
storage facility, that they want to buy a storage facility, but use it as a cabin.
Our storage building, they sell these.
Yes.
Okay, so you want to put a D that says what, Allison?
I was trying to see if it was already included in the cabin definition, number 3, owner provided permanent structures. We could add it there,
Say what?
that they must be park model or site built.
Where's that again? Tell me.
In the definition
definition.
section, yeah,
I would support that.
it might fit better there than,
So you're gonna say Oh, that's over here. Just, you have, let's see, temporary occupancy of tents, recreational vehicles, travel trails, park model RVs, cabins or other, so which words do you want to add there?
Under number 3, cabins,
Oh,
just add that the owner provided permanent structures must be park model or site built.
the park model or site.
And that will limit the risk of storage.
Do the cabins operate at
They did.
fully functional house?
They're really nice.
Comes with a dock.
All right, that's good. Okay, number 5, doesn't look like the planning commission changed anything on theirs. We went with a bigger minimum size. The 690 is about a 25 by 25. And we went with 1,000, which was 33 by 30. That's for a minimum size. How do you feel about that?
So that, I go back to Lincoln's argument of the tent site, don't go in anything 30, 35, whatever you said.
Is that 1,000 square feet?
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't need 1,000 square feet. So this minimum space size needs to be divided into 2 pieces. You want minimum space size for an RV, actually 3. You probably want minimum space size for an RV, minimum space size for a cabin.
Well, maybe 1,000 is too much. We can go back to what we had before, which was before we started this in 2023. We had 890 as the number. Was the number.
They took it down to 690.
They did because we adopted the Greenville. The Greenville was just grabbed that whole section. There was a lot of thought in that. So maybe 890.
I mean, I still think a tent space and an RV.
I know we're trying to simplify this. Depending upon.
Mm-hmm.
Do what you want to do, you could put a chart out there, 2x2 or a 3x3 chart. This use, this many minimum square feet, this use. Could.
Yeah, but
Still have to have vehicle space though.
Yeah, got it.
Gotta have room for their vehicle. also.
it's still going to be
With primitive camping, you leave your vehicle in a flat.
like it is. I use the example of a 33 by 30. It doesn't have to be square. In all likely, it's going to be a ring of a road, and he's going to worry about the frontage on that road. Yeah, it's going to be a rectangle. So it's really not bad because on the road is going to go out to probably 2 acres behind it, where there's nothing, because he's not going to build another road back. You know what I mean? It's if you really wanted to regulate the space, you'd probably regulate the road frontage for each site. You know what I mean? Because if you have something that looks like this site is going to, can conceivably look like this. And you can get the square footage just by going out here where there's no man's land, nobody's using it. You know what I mean? Yeah. So that's what they'll likely do. So really, the answer would be, and I don't want to make this too complicated. I'm okay with 890, but they're going to get around the campsite thing, but they're just going to narrow the road frontage for a campsite. And they're going to make it a little bit bigger for a fifth wheel, and they're going to make it even bigger for an RV. So you'll be able to find the space just by going deeper into the so I really, 890 just was what we had before. Any thoughts on that? I would just go with 890. What do you think?
If it was 690, then y'all wanted to change it to 1,000. 90?
No, way back when it was 890. Then we adopted the Greenville section, which took it down to 690. And they kept it at 690, and I wanted to bring it to 1,000. But obviously, there's not support for that. So 890 would be optimal.
Just go back to what it was prior to.
Yeah.
This work if the cabin can't be more than 700 square feet, minimum space is 690. Anything there? Should.
So you're just not gonna be able to put it,
Yeah.
it's gonna have to be a bigger lot.
Minimum.
These are minimums. And actually, just doing the math, you did a 7x10 cabin. You had 20 foot of minimum space on all sides with each cabin. And other adjacent structures included but not limited to parking pads, bathhouse, office, blah, blah, blah. Then you would, at a minimum on a 7x10, you have to have 910 feet, right?
7 by 10 is 70 square feet.
You're right. I think my math completely
70 by
wrong. Yeah, 70x10.
You think it would be that rectangular?
No, I was just doing, I was trying to do it at the end of the day.
So the cabin site could basically be the size of the 690, the whole lot. I mean, obviously it would be built that way, if the lot.
That's the point.
So keeping the minimum small helps with your tent sites, but everyone's gonna have to be bigger to meet all the other requirements.
Is that what you want to do?
That's what I would.
The whole point was, no matter what you say your minimum size is, everything else is gonna require.
So what do you want, what do you want to do? Leave it?
Yeah. Maybe 690.
All right, so we're gonna go with, that's gonna be the one. That's checked. All right, setbacks around the edges is 100 feet. Nobody had any concerns with that. Anybody want to change that? Okay, number 7, campsites served by an online sewage. Destiny, I think you had a concern about number 7.
Yeah, I just wanted to question whether communal systems allow private wells as well. Because the language says, I think it's further down at 9, but it says all campsites must have public water either directly or communally.
So is your question that the well may be too close in proximity to the sewer system?
Correct. I think there may be a contradiction in the
Well, there's already, we already have rules that say that the well cannot be within a certain number of feet.
Only state rule that addresses
language.
They would just pipe it.
that. I want to reference it.
Yeah, we need to just reference it. Yeah, I just think we have to just make everything kind of mirror.
Okay, so you think you want to take care of that?
Yes.
So we're looking at number 7, and Destiny's gonna add some language?
Correct.
Okay, now we go to number 8. Nobody had any issues with number 8. I'm just capitalizing campground and campsite, so I'd probably change it to capital. For campsites within the campground capitals. Any issues with number 8? Okay, number 9, same thing, just changing those lowercase c's to just uppercase c's. Nobody has any issues with the individually powered meters. Okay, number 10, let's see, with more than 4 campsites, a storm shelter shall be provided. I guess that's some kind of rule.
Just for safety.
Okay, so that's 10 is, check that off. Now 11, Allison, this is yours. You're going to make this change.
Yes, we as staff feel that asking for a management plan at the time of land use approval is a little too far of a reach. That's business related, that's not government related in our opinion. While we do understand the intent is to make sure that people aren't living there, I think we've put other rules in place to enforce that already. And so I do think that we basically add it as a checklist item to the development permit, which comes after land use. And then we would keep the management plan on file with the permit to reference if we have a code issue.
And how does that change 11A, B, and C?
That's it, right?
It would
Takes it out of this section.
In yours.
it would be in the development permit
So
instead.
it comes in, this is give it to them later.
Okay, so basically 11 is going to be the version in mind, and then X out all that under it. That's what you're saying? Okay.
Yes.
Everybody agree with that? Okay,
Yes.
11 is going to be our version. Okay, this one, 12, I just didn't like the wording on it because it said 9/11 dressing is required for all campgrounds. It's actually all campsites. So that's gonna be the version I have. So you want every little lot to have its own notes.
Including primitive?
Yeah.
I mean, they always have a site number, but that would have a 911.
Okay, that's what you're doing. So that's the version that's down line.
Identifying right now.
Or you were, yeah,
Yes. Yeah, that's safety.
Okay, 13 buffers, we didn't change any wording, but Destiny had an issue with buffers.
Not in the new, not in this one. I'm fine with the language on this.
You're good. Okay, so
So
13
I
is good.
think we did make a note that we would add campground specifically to the chart in Article 8. And we
Okay.
can do that again with the whereas clause.
Okay.
Okay, so campgrounds added to Article 8. So you have to do that somewhere else, right? Okay, so you'll take care of that. All right. Minimum separation between RVs, Planning Commission has changed some wording, and we were okay. Any issues with 14, 1 and 2? Nope. They added lighting. All lighting must be dark sky compliant. We were okay with that. How do you feel about that? Okay, 16, Allison, I think you want to strike all that.
Yes, we already do this as part of the development review process, so we don't see why it needs to be stated.
Okay, is everybody okay with scratching that? Okay. Does it make sense to have wording in here that code enforcement can make periodic inspections to determine condition of the campground and is adhering to health and safety standards and standards listed in this section?
It does help. Argument there is it puts the applicant on notice that they're going to be subject.
So that's something you want, is that
Well,
okay?
with the help.
I don't know, whatever wording, I made that up. Yeah.
I would
Yeah.
I don't know what they would be looking at. I'm not health
Whatever.
inspectors.
But I think the idea that they need to know that can happen.
Yeah, does it make sense? Yeah, okay, I'll say. So it'd be code enforcement,
Is that not, I support that, but is that not, you said there's a general like opening to all of this? All of it, if you're not following this, you're subject to.
Yeah, that's in the front of the code. It's not, it wouldn't be specific.
Well, it's in the UDS too, that mechanism for enforcement.
okay, so the wording's gonna look something like this. You'll bring us back a better. Code enforcement, Megan, code enforcement can make periodic inspections to determine condition of the campground, adhering to what?
Permit or development permit conditions and adherence to the management plan.
Okay, Megan, you'll have that and you'll pass that on, whoever writes this draft. Okay, Megan's gonna do that. All right, now the home stretch is the definitions. Now, it looks like we're using the definition of the planning commission. Everybody look at that closely. Is there anything that we changed that's going to change these definitions?
You said on the planning one?
Yeah, we're going to be the planning one. We're going to use that one.
Well, we need to first strike out RVs. It's in there a lot. And I think I just want to tighten it. Like
Well, we need RVs
you need RVs.
included. so
right
that
here on the
they-
second line. Okay.
It's
I
just,
think I just have a general concern, like Claiborne did, with just everything being lumped in. But I think that's more you guys like a policy decision versus a legal decision. I do think it's a bit confusing, but I would just want to, me and Allison will get together and just tighten it.
okay, yes. Get that to us. Okay, so,
The only question I had about this, sorry, is it says we took the time to give a primary purpose at the campground, but then it's come up several times here that we rely on Duke Energy moving workers to come through, which is not listed in all of these reasons we think you might want a campground. So I just am wondering why we're taking the time to tell people the reason you might want.
what'd you say?
Because like people also, so this then the primary purpose of a campground is to offer temporary outdoor living and accommodations for recreational, religious, educational, or vacation purposes or compensation. But we've already said, or it also houses employees who are here temporarily. We'll use it when their home is under construction. I mean, like, I'm just
Yeah.
wondering why we're taking the time to list all the reasons you make a
I would just take that out.
Right,
I
or
think
the primary
I think
purpose of
the
a camp,
for compensation part is important, but not the recreational,
basically
religious,
the whole
educational,
for
vacation.
part, right. The primary purpose of a campground is to offer temporary outdoor living and accommodation for compensation. And get rid of all of these. Just for the sake of being concise.
Okay, well, that makes sense. The primary person, around, well,
So from
So
for the
here-
purposes.
okay, well, not, okay. Then also, you're gonna, campsite 3, gonna be must be park model or site built. Okay, we made it through, let's see if we got this right. Pretty follow me close. We went with the title of campground as is, campground is fine. Then for purpose, we ended up going with the one that Dale and I did because it had the word "and" in it. And then the same thing with 302B1. We made sure I used the version that we had, which was campsite was in there rather than site. Campsite. Roadways, I just changed that one thing to A. That was it, so that correction needs to be done. Next thing is going to be turnarounds and curves. Now, we wanted to come back to campgrounds with the minimum of 5 acres in size and shall not exceed 10 acres. Destiny wanted to put extra wording in there. I guess we're okay with that. Destiny, you gonna write something?
Yes.
Now, we end up going with the planning commission version now for 3 and placeholder of 135 days. Now, overall site density, we ended up using 5 on item number 4. So it'd be off the version that Dale and I had. Overall density of the campground should be limited to no more than 5 campsites per acre. The wording underneath it is fine. No problems there. Space, what did we do on the minimum space size? 3. Did we end up with the 690?
Yeah.
Okay, so we ended up with 690, so there was a planning commission version on that. Planning commission version on 6, 7. We end up
Well, 7, we're gonna add the
capital C.
health services, whatever the new DHEC is.
We're gonna add a reference to the existing.
Oh, yeah, that's in the ed language. Okay, that's fine.
And also it's not going to be.
Environmental services.
I forgot to note. Number 8, we'll use mine because it's the same thing. It's got capitals there. Number 11, we're going to use mine because it has Allison's changes of the development permit. And then it's got all those crossouts. Number 12, we're going to use the one that Dale and I did because it's each campsite within the campground will have a 911. 13, we'll use mine or planning commission, no matter the same. Destiny's going to add campgrounds, going to be added to article number 8, correct?
Correct.
14, either one is fine. 15, either one is fine. 16 gets crossed out. We're going to add maybe a 17 that says code enforcement can make periodic inspections to determine condition. That's going to be 17.
It'll be a new 16.
Be a new 16 here. And then you're going to look, Megan, you got the wording on that from Ken. Definitions, we just had, what change did we have? Was it any changes on that?
The campground purposes shall cross out.
Yeah, purposes, and then we also said, campsite number 3 must be park model or site built. I think we call that a second reading. We'll look at it again. So I'm gonna make a motion to do that as a second reading.
Accept those changes.
To accept those changes, as we said. We're gonna all get a copy of this and look at it very closely before we vote on it for a third time.
Okay.
I'll second your motion.
Okay.
Does this have a public hearing portion?
We have to have a public reading on third reading. Public,
A
you'll
public
have a
hearing,
public when
yeah.
somebody comes up to the podium.
Yeah.
We'll need to.
They'll
make
have
sure we
to-
have enough
They'll
time.
do that. We do that at the next meeting. All right, any other discussion on that? Now, it's gonna be complicated. We'll just double check it, make sure it's correct. I got very good notes, but make sure nothing's flipped through. All right, any Other discussion on that? Okay, those in favor of this, raise your right hand. Those opposed, passes 5-1. Okay, next item up is gonna be,
Chair,
yeah.
he made the motion, but then he voted against it.
Okay. Moving in the wrong direction. All right, next up is number, gonna be 2B, first reading in title only, for establishing a Lake Kiwi overlay. Gonna be 2B. I'll start that off. We got some requests from property owners on Lake Kiwi to consider putting an overlay on the lake. Lake Kiwi's in my district, it's also in Council Wallace's district. We discussed this one, on February 2nd with the county council. I think when the planning commission chairman spoke, we talked a little bit about moving forward with this, or at least exploring it. I scheduled a meeting with the Vineyards on March 3rd with Mr. Roper. I think we had about 80 residents there at least. And we talked about the width of the overlay, industrial, commercial, residential development inside the overlay. The building setback, which is 100 feet now, whether they keep that the same or raise that. And we took good notes. We passed them on to the planning commission. I also mailed out letters to a few people in my district that live on the lake. There's not a lot of them in my district, other than the Vineyards, which is set, but I mean, just ancillary kind of residents there. And I'm waiting on feedback from them. We pulled the overlay ordinance from Oconee, as well as I looked in Greenville and Anderson. I can see when they are cold, they said they don't have any. I found one in Kershaw County, and I shut that off planning. In Council Wallace, you're working on gathering public input for your District 2.
Yes, we will be having a public meeting April 2nd, 6 p.m. at Shady Grove. Will be announced.
Yeah, they'll go out on social media.
Okay. Mr. Roper, you got some thoughts?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think this is important work that we're entering into here with the overlay. For many years, the companies had an overlay on their side. We haven't really had a very stringent overlay. Few points that I would like to just basically put on the record, talk about justification for us doing it. Lake Kiwi is one of Pickens County's most remarkable natural and recreational resources. 18,000 acres of water, more than 300 miles of shoreline. Provides opportunities for boating, fishing, swimming, outdoor recreation that attract residents and visitors alike. It also preserves large areas for scenic purposes. There's open space areas throughout the lake and undeveloped land that contribute to the quality of life that makes our county special. But Lake Kiwi is more than just a recreational asset. It is also one of the most important drinking water reservoirs in our region. Arguably in the state, but certainly also potentially in the Southeast. Hundreds of thousands of people in upstate South Carolina rely on Lake Kiwi for clean drinking water, not just in Pickens County, but also in Greenville County and surrounding communities as well. Because of the unique recreation, unique natural areas, and also the unique necessity of protecting this watershed, staff supports the beginning of looking into a Lake Kiwi overlay district, and we're glad the council is willing to go on that journey as well. The goal is to recognize that this lake represents a special public interest that extends beyond any one property, any one subdivision, any one section of the shoreline. An overlay district that you all are considering will give the county a thoughtful way to address issues such as water quality, shoreline management, flooding risks, and also preserving our natural heritage. And how those factors affect our homes, our businesses, county infrastructure, private infrastructure, and the long-term health of the lake. It's a shared resource Lake Kiwi is for all of our citizens, not just folks that live there. And studying an overlay district is a prudent step toward protecting its value, its natural beauty, and its role as a vital source of drinking water for generations to come. So staff welcomes this initiative. Thank you all for being willing to go through this journey.
You sound pretty passionate.
Yes, sir.
Have your thoughts?
I think you summed it up quite well.
Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Wallace and myself? Working on this in our districts or the administration?
I'll speak to what I'm trying to balance when I look at this. I completely support the environmental protection, especially with this being where we're getting our water. And like when y'all did the overlay for Highway 11, general consensus, view shed is something that is uniquely Pickens. And in this case, saying that the lake is a beautiful part of the county we want to protect. I completely agree with that. Where I start to get a little uncomfortable is telling people what they can do with their private property and telling what kind of business can or can't go there without knowing, like, would a lovely lakefront restaurant destroy the water quality of Lake Kiwi? If we get rid of all commercial, then we're saying that we think it would. I mean, there's some really high-end condominiums in Kiwi Key. We've got people emailing us saying, please don't allow a condominium complex. Would having 4 condos destroy the environment in front of? I'm not sure. I don't know that. So I want to balance. I understand why homeowners want only other residents. Obviously, that's what most people want as neighbors. But I want to make sure we're not overreaching by saying how people can use their private property or sell it or develop it, unless what we're really sticking to is because it's for protection, for conservation, right? So that's the balance I want to hit, is conserving a beautiful natural resource while not overreaching, telling people exactly what they can do. Balance I want.
Well, honestly, in District 2, there's not a whole lot of property.
That's fair, yeah.
Developed. There's a lot of small, privately owned, single-family lots still. Large tracts, there's hardly any left. So I really don't think anybody's gonna want to. But how do you feel? And you guys look at GIS too.
It's hard to say never on anything out there. It's changed a lot just in our lifetimes.
Right.
Predominantly, you've got the cliffs community on one side, shoreline, Isle Creek. You've got some private area. You've got the reserve. Next to the reserve.
Cedar Creek.
Cedar Creek, I'm sorry. Blank. Then out toward the nuclear plant, you've got Knott's Landing.
Knott's Landing is Highlands. There's still some tracks in there.
Sioux Creek Roads.
That's right.
Private. And Lakeside Drive. Very little property.
But any of those owners might want to sell. Yeah.
That's why we're having the public input.
Yeah. I think you're
It was pretty open. I mean, when you talk to the owners, they won't restrict their property, like restrict people. They don't want to see it.
Of course they don't.
It was overwhelming. They're willing to give up their right, check what they have there, and get in their car. I mean, that's pretty overwhelming. And when I knocked those all through up there, one time I knocked 166 doors. 99 answered. Pitched my plan to 95. No new, and this is Highway 11. No new manufacturing. No new commercial. No new residents. Pitched it to 95. 4 people had reservations. I won that precinct with over 7. Those 2 precincts with over 70%. People, that's what they want, and it's their property. They want that restriction. And you talk the one-off guy that wants to build a hotel. You know, he's in a very small minority. So the question is, as long as you're not violating his rights under the law, when the bell's ringing that loud, I mean, I listen. That's how I feel.
Are we within the law putting restrictions up that on an overlay?
It's a difficult question because when we've been talking about this, where we've got this development agreement that allows for certain things, and so it's something that we're gonna have to look into and continue having those conversations, because you're kind of in a lose-lose situation no matter how you check it, really.
But short of a development, An overlay is, there's no issues at all, right?
Well, it would still have to be narrowly tailored to fit these areas that y'all are authorized by state law to regulate. So you couldn't just be arbitrary with it. You're gonna have to talk about the natural reasons, the watershed reasons, the preserving the open
Is
space
that gonna limit
reasons.
the width of it too?
You know, if you ended up completely consuming parcels within that width, we would have to think about it more closely. I think it's for tonight's purposes, what I would stress, and I would defer to Destiny on this, is that this is the beginning of a process where those questions need to be addressed.
It's been one very informal meeting.
That's right.
Well, and that, actually, a follow-up on that too, is why are we doing just one lake? So 3 lakes are in Pickens County. And that, to me, it would almost make more sense to say we collectively want to protect the lakefront instead of just making one.
That would make it not arbitrary.
But the
There
thing
you
is,
go.
thing
And
is,
so, Hartwell, we know is, we can't override federal, which is the core. So, but if we collect, but we're not talking about Kiwi, and I know that Kiwi is mostly Duke now, but we don't know what they're gonna do. They sold it to Cliffs. If we just collectively said this is the lake overlay districts of Pickens County, to me, that makes more sense to say we're doing this for all the lakes. We know that what we do won't apply much to Hartwell. The core trumps it. And we know that there's not a lot of land
The
left.
University on both of the shoreline.
Yeah, I mean, it's right.
And all, in your district inside the city club.
Right.
It anyway.
Right, but we could still say we are collectively doing an overlay of the lakes of Pickens County. And that way, there's nothing about it being looking like it's just one spot or one place or responding to one set of angry homeowners. It's saying, we believe that all the lakes are worth protecting, their beauty is essential to the county. And then we collectively do.
What would be the situation with the Corps of Engineers
With the,
if we decided to do this, all the major lakes, and the Corps of Engineers controls Hartwell? What would that look like?
we would just have to be sure that our language isn't kind of preempting what they're already doing, certainly. But I think there's a balance that we can accomplish where we're not being arbitrary, but we're still pushing the message. And I think a lot of it can be accomplished in certain whereas clauses that we can be crafty and drafting.
I think if you say the word lakes, public's gonna interpret it as everybody. It really will. And
Why I said the main-
that's why, and Joe Cassie, I looked at Joe Cassie. With the one what you're saying. And Joe Cassie really is not even privately owned. It's either owned by Natural Resources, which is, I guess, a state agency, or Duke. So, I mean, we could, if the feedback is good, then I think we could probably add Joe Cassie. I don't know if I want to get into Hartwell. It seems like the Army Corps. That was my thinking. Now, Joe Cassie's in my district,
Well,
and like I said, I don't think one resident lives on it.
Joe Cassie feeds Kiwi.
Yeah, I agree.
So
I agree.
those two are kind of tied together already.
But what we could do is we could, why don't you get feedback from your,
Yeah.
you get your feedback. We'll have a regular, work session a month from now. No vote, regular work session. We'll try to nail something down. And we'll come back in early May and have second reading, early June have third reading. We could do that. That's gonna give us plenty of time to get feedback. I'm gonna ask about Joe Cassie, talk to people about, although I didn't find one resident on it.
But the point of this is that we're saying what we would most like to see. We don't know what's gonna change. Nobody thought that.
This is very fluid right
Yeah,
now.
so we don't.
Yeah.
So I would just leave it open. We'll start with Kiwi.
Again, we'll make it massive pushback and, not,
So I'm just, let me just make a motion for a first reading, on this,
Now.
Lake Joe Cassie.
before you do, I have a legal question. If we decide to do Kiwi, Joe Cassie, this need to be renamed,
I would hope so, for sure.
which would mean another first reading.
I
If it
think
was-
we
if
can
it changed
probably,
it.
could we take out, again, in this moment, probably just the specificity it has there with Lake Kiwi?
Yeah, but I don't want to do that because I think people are going to get the interpretation. It's every.
It does.
Wait, that one doesn't have it.
I guess
Internet agenda does.
Okay, yeah, this one doesn't have it actually.
It's
I must
on
have
the
seen something
agenda,
else.
Lake Kiwi.
It's on the
The
packet.
printed
It says
agenda
Lake
has.
Okay,
So, like I said, I'm not.
That's why.
Okay, so you're saying that you couldn't add Lake Joe Cassie in a second reading? You think you can?
Can you? If you can, I mean.
We just added a bunch of stuff to the.
I think I would just copy you guys on just the agenda showing exactly what y'all are gonna be voting for, what y'all are considering, just in the spirit of transparency and being clear and knowing exactly what y'all are taking action on.
And it would, I think, be most important, because
How about you say,
but as long as you do it before the public hearing, I think that's the most important. But, we've had years where the entire budget changed at third reading.
For sure, but our agendas are under scrutiny right now.
So that's legal, but what's fair to the public is literally right now, I think, what do they call it? Sunshine Week in South Carolina. So as long as we've got it the way it needs to be before that public hearing is noticed, I think that's the thing.
I agree. I think there's two case laws that come to the agenda that are real. There's two case laws that are out 2014. One of them is this idea that you add something for final reading that night. There was a case on that. That's a big case. They were up. That's what you have to do that only on an emergency circumstance. That was the big case there. You can't. They're really worried about you adding something that night to the agenda and then passing it.
Final action.
Yeah, final action, which we don't even get close to. If we did this, we'd probably change it on second reading. Probably. The other thing is having a bunch of discussion in the executive session. Other than that, it's the Freedom of Information Act, which doesn't really say anything. There's very little about the event. Okay.
I was just trying to make sure we were.
It's a great question, especially because the public's gonna wanna know.
I'm not disagreeing with the case law at all. I just think with certain hot button topics, you just need to be a little bit more conscientious. Like Megan brought up a good point about the Board of Appeals. I think that's a completely different, smaller issue than we know people are very, very concerned about this. And so just in the spirit of being transparent and in the spirit of being forthcoming in all of our agendas, we need to be clear on what you're taking action on.
So, Mr. Chairman, I'd make the argument that, and I understand Brent's stand and I appreciate it, legally speaking, but I think that we would be covered for all the arguments' sake that we said, to strike out Kiwi and make the motion to amend, I guess, that first reading in title only, an ordinance number 684 establishing a lake overlay district to protect the water quality. And we stated all the reasons why, because let's be real, anything in Jocassee is going to affect Kiwi. Just because it's not there today, don't mean it won't be there tomorrow. So I think that's well within the spirit, and we've covered that in great detail with this conversation tonight. But I do think that if we went with a Lake Kiwi overlook, and then on the third reading decided that Jocassee, that would be even more hinky to the public.
Well, how about we do this? Why don't we just do Lake Kiwi now and then come back in 6 months and do Jocassee?
You can do that too.
There's nothing up there. I mean, let's do Power's gonna build his power plant. I
Because,
don't see it changing.
because in order to legally have an overlay district, we have to say why we're declaring it. Excuse me if I misinterpreted you, but it sounds like it's a lot easier to justify why we need to do an overlay district if we're collectively saying to protect the lakes than it is to say just this one of 3 lakes.
Yeah, but when you say, like I said, when you say lakes, it's public's gonna be every body of water is being regulated by. They'll just
We
interpret.
could just call them the 3 major lakes.
You'll
People
have to
will-
specifically say.
Right, they are a lake system, all 3 connected through dams.
We again have to balance also just not being arbitrary and responding to a loud group of individuals and
Exactly.
creating policy on that.
Called spot zoning, right? We're supposed to avoid that.
Can't do that.
Right. So to me, it's safer and better government to say we're doing it.
How we get more feedback.
Yeah.
I mean, I know, trust me, I'm gonna talk to most everybody in my district. Like, I'm gonna be very confident. Just
I think the
Just be
question.
sure, you're gonna go talk to everybody on Hotline, you're gonna go down and talk to all those people.
That's the
I
whole
work
purpose, that's the whole purpose of having the public meeting.
That's why we're gonna,
Now, I think the question at hand though is having specifically Lake Kiwi in this first reading. That's what my question was. If we are possibly gonna add 2 more lakes to it, then we need to amend this. Or are we that far in the process yet? Because we haven't had an official public meeting yet. Does that work?
Again, I think I would advise you that I think the title itself is arbitrary. However, I think going forward, we can rectify it certainly, but like I mentioned, for the spirit of being transparent and forthcoming, I think even if we're doing something in title only, it should state, it should be clear and it shouldn't be arbitrary. And this title, to a layperson, looks like we are applying ordinances directly related specifically to Lake Kiwi.
That's my
That's,
purpose.
that's what, yeah,
That's my purpose.
that's the purpose of
I
that.
don't think, why would that be illegal?
My question is that if we do decide that, whether too late in it, will we have to start this process?
I have no problem restarting. I really don't. We can come back and do Joe Cassie rereading. But, like I said, Joe Cassie is nothing to do. It's in my district. There's nothing to do there. There's nobody, just it's all owned by a private company.
No, I know, but saying this again, the reason we don't want to finish this and then start over is because the first thing we have to do is establish where is there an overlay? Where do we have the justification for an overlay?
Could you just extend the overlay district later on?
You could, but if
That would
the
be the
political
solution.
will exists to do that, that's always the catch-22 we end up in. It's like, if you're willing to talk about it, go, let's do all of it, but I understand.
My feeling is it's just me and my district. I want to just do the one right now. I don't want to do,
Why?
because I want to get complete feedback on it. Consider doing
You
more.
just said nobody lives there.
No, I'm talking about Hartwell and all the other stuff. I mean, we gotta get complete
Well,
feedback.
it would require several public meetings.
Yeah, and I just don't spend that much time on it.
I have both lakes in my district. You've got, well, you've got, okay,
He's got two.
I mean, maybe, like I said, I'm just comfortable. And like I said, if people are not comfortable adding a second or third lake during this series, we can come back with another goal, 6 months and add the other two.
Well, let's have our meeting on the second, fill out what's going on. Need to modify.
Okay, so I'm gonna make a motion in title only for overlay of Lake Kiwi now. There's a second on that. Any discussion?
Okay.
Yeah, sure.
I'd like to make a motion to amend it to remove Kiwi and just make it a lake.
Second on that?
Second that for a little more discussion. Would that simplify things if we take Kiwi out of this? Is it gonna change anything?
No, and I think my concern is genuinely just making sure it's not arbitrary and we're not just responding to a small group of people and creating policy on that. But again, it's your guys' job to create policy. I'm just warning you of just legally what it looks like.
Of
So
course.
if we keep it general, then if we end up deciding to only do Kiwi, that's easier than if we keep it as Kiwi and get down discussions.
Is there a term already out there that encompasses all three lakes? Some watershed system, blah, whatever.
Yeah,
But we already have
Kiwi
that.
Toxway,
Watershed.
watershed project, hydroelectric project. That's what I think it's called under the
That includes all three lakes?
If you look at the, EPA, you have it's not in the same as
It's not in the same watershed.
Savannah,
It's the Kiwi River watershed.
because Greenville, I'm not gonna say illegally takes the water across the watershed, I'm not gonna say they do that. But there is EPA standard that wouldn't allow that today.
We can check on that, and I like you do, Mr. Lane, always go back to like, is this already defined somewhere? Why are we reinventing it? We can look back at that and see if there's a closer definition. The way to make that work would be to just take Kiwi out and just say it's a lake overlay district, and y'all could define it. Not suggesting a path, but I guess that's what your motion is. Until we can come up with a better title that y'all have a consensus on.
I think
Start
the public-
broad,
I think the
yeah.
public's interpreted it much broader than it is.
That's why.
You're gonna create a lot of pushback. They're gonna be arguing something way over here that's not even what we're talking about. I think it's the whole process. That's my opinion, because it's just, I mean, I'm on Facebook all the time. And the stuff that's argued on Facebook, most of it, I can argue that's not true. because somebody just heard something. They felt something.
Mr. Sato, when are you going to admit to the public that the roof on the courthouse needs to be replaced?
I know. I mean, it's like, it's just, you just, and when they hear just a piece of something, and you're just gonna open this whole thing, and it's just, most of the hardware, we're probably not even gonna be able to break it. So it's like, why go there? At Jocassee, there's no imminent need to do that. I mean, maybe we can add Jocassee, maybe, Ron, if you wanna do that, we can do that now. But I'm just thinking, if you just say lake, I got a lake behind my house, they're gonna try to steal it. I'm telling you. It's
That's
just
why he was asking, is there
it's
there already a name?
something that the public will understand, that will say it's just this area.
No.
On Facebook, no. That's my opinion, I think that's the risk.
I don't disagree. I think that's a good point. I just do feel strongly that in this litigious stage that we're in our county, we have to be sure that our ordinances aren't arbitrary. But I think we can accomplish it being general in a whereas clause, for sure.
What does arbitrary mean?
It's not specific to one person. You're not singling out one person. You're not making a rule that's to limit someone else's, I guess, right in a way. I'll look it up and give you a Webster definition.
So you have to do the whole area, where you run the risk of being sued. Every like thing has to be included, where you run the risk of being sued.
Well, an overlay would be more of a region.
It says arbitrary describes actions, decisions, or rules based on random choice, personal whim, or impulse rather than reason, logic, or system. It often implies unfairness or a lack of a guiding plan. It can also mean using absolute power without restraint.
Okay, so let's say there's no development or potential development of capacity, so I don't want to look at it. That's arbitrary, and I'm going to get sued for that?
Well, I think we're saying the opposite, is that it may affect that. No.
I would say, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. If you've got a consensus around Kiwi, it's a protection.
Yeah, and then like I said, we can always, my feeling is Hartwell, it's not my district, but you're gonna spend a lot of time now.
Yeah.
I mean, if you wanna be sure, I mean, like I said, I went not, stores did it twice.
Well, what I
You
generally,
wanna be sure.
well, what I expect is gonna happen on Hartwell is that we're just gonna say, the decision that gets made for Hartwell is refer to the court, and we'll just move on, and that will be how we address. The overlay district will say on Hartwell, use core guidelines, Kiwi and Jocassee, but we will have collectively said that the overlay district, I just want to define the overlay district as a black box.
Something
But
like
then
the
when-
the lake's made up by the Upper Savannah River watershed, something along those lines.
Well, the thing is, what you could do is, why don't you just start on that? Why don't you start on a plan to do that? And we can catch up with you later.
No, my argument here is not that I want Hartwell to have more rules, because I think the court takes care of it. It's that I want us as a council, for the UDSO for the overlay district to be collectively the lakes, the major lakes, because they all influence each other. And that makes sense for where we would put an overlay, as opposed to saying, we would like to drop our overlay only on this one piece, because those are the residents that came to us.
No, that's not what I'm doing. It's just in Jocassee case, it's not gonna get developed because there's no private ownership.
Well,
That's why. In Hartwell, the Hartwell would be so difficult to do that properly and get feedback.
right, and we
We
would,
can do that at some point in the future, but I think it's gonna just slow everything down and so go at once.
I agree, and I actually think that's what's gonna happen, is we're not gonna do anything. My argument is that we set the overlay as applying to all of them, and then end up saying, well, we don't need to do it on Hartwell, and it might be different in these places, but we declare the overlay as applying to all lakes. And then what we do after that might be different, yes.
I just think when you said all, public's gonna get all bodies.
The Kiwi, Tuxway, Savannah River, Upper Savannah River, something about those three. No
Kiwi
private.
Toxway's right.
Kiwi Toxway is
Okay, so what is the last? What is most people?
See, this got derailed and turned into something way more complicated.
Yeah,
I think
we're on my amendment to take the word Kiwi off, so that's the first question, is
Alright, so
voting on that.
I'm not gonna vote for the reasons I said. Do you want to speak on that?
Well, it looks like even doing Kiwi is a sizable project, and I would probably recommend eating one piece of the pie at a time. That would be probably as much as we want to deal with. for right now.
All right, any other comments? Scott, you want to weigh in on that?
I don't have a problem with doing it that way. But if we are gonna do multi-lake, use vernacular that's already out there for the lake system. There's gotta be one. Can't tell you what it is, but there's gotta be one. That route. I don't have a problem with it.
Okay. So, Council Bowers, you want to weigh in on it? No? Okay, you're gonna have to vote now. Okay, so you're just saying taking like Kiwi out, right?
They're just saying the word Kiwi.
Kiwi out, okay.
That's my.
Those in favor of that, raise your right hand. Those opposed? You're opposed, okay, so it goes back to the original motion, which is what, like Kiwi? Is that the motion? Any discussion on that? Okay, those in favor, it's first title only. Yeah, that's title only on that. Those raise your right hand. Opposed, same sign, passes unanimous, okay. Okay, next item up is gonna be item 3, it's an executive session motion. I'm gonna make a motion to go into executive session for boards and commission appointments.
I'll say that.
Second. Any discussion on that? Those in favor, raise your right hand. Those opposed, same sign.
Any break?
Yeah, everyone just take a break.